I speak to you in the name of God, Creator, Redeemer, and Sustainer. Amen. So we're in the midst of something known as the season of creation, which is a chunk of ordinary time in the fall when the church around the world, ecumenically, across denominational lines, sets aside time to take seriously our call to care for the earth. It's a movement that's gained traction over the last 30 some odd years and that was endorsed by the Pope almost 10 years ago. It's an important thing. So here at Incarnation, it's something that we've always felt an affinity with, and it's something that our worship committee wanted to grab hold of and really do some extra work to mark this year. So this week and the next 2 weeks, we're going to be doing things a little bit differently. You won't hear a homily from me. I'll offer a very short introduction most weeks, a little longer this week, and then turn it over to a member of our worship team or some material that someone from our worship team has prepared so that we might turn our attention to some really important issues related to the climate crisis. The first thing to say about all of this is that we are not fragmented beings. It is not the case that there are bits and pieces of our lives scattered around our personal life, our family life, our professional life, our spiritual life. We're integrated beings, a fusion of spirit and flesh. And so we know that God is present in the midst of the world, that God cares for the material world. It's not disposable, which is to say that this whole thing isn't beside the point. It's not a distraction before we go back to our regularly scheduled programming in a few weeks. It's actually at the heart of what we're called to be as church, as we take seriously our calling to care for the world and to steward the good creation that we've been invested with. The second thing to say is that parable was maybe a bit weird. Is anybody kind of left feeling like, oh, torture and slavery, and there's a guy being sold and his family to pay a debt that no one could really hope to pay? There's a lot there that I would love to dig into, and we'll have to leave it for another time. But let me make just a couple of quick observations. The first is that Peter asks this question of Jesus: how many times should I forgive people? 7 times? The same person 7 times? Really? And Jesus says, no, not 7, 77, which is a very Jewish way of saying as many times as it takes. But then what Jesus does is very deftly upend the position that Peter is speaking from. Because Peter assumes that he's the one in the position of being wronged. He's the one in the position of forgiving. By the end of the parable, Peter is wondering what it means for him to be forgiven. Peter is reminded that it's actually God who has already extended forgiveness and grace and mercy. So Peter then starts from that place of having first received, and is then prompted to extend that forgiveness, that love, to all those around him. That's an important point because it's easy to despair when we start thinking about all the ways that we go astray, or the ways that we've been wronged, or how broken the world is. But we don't engage in confession and absolution to beat ourselves up. We do it to remember the forgiveness that we've received so that we might be set free to engage in something that is hopeful and constructive for the world around us. So it is with our conversation about the climate crisis, about all the things that are scary and broken in the world around us. It is so easy to get sucked into a place of despair because the issues are many and they are big and they are overwhelming. But what we've tried to do as we prepared material for this week and the next few weeks is make sure that we engage with it in a way that says, yeah, there's many issues that we need to take seriously, but we do it also observing the ways that we are called to hope and trust and know that God is present in the midst of all of this. So don't hear all of this with too heavy a heart. Know that these are important things that we take seriously, but also know that there is reason to hope as we are called to new life in God. So with all of that said, I'll invite Michele to come forward and speak to us about our first topic in the season of creation.
Water. The most incredible compound in the universe. This molecule is comprised of 3 atoms, slightly polar or charged by nature and found in 3 states naturally within the temperature range of this planet. Water is literally the cradle of life. For this reason, I created the window art installation in its magnificent curve. It's a cradle. Given the paramount importance of this molecule, today I'm reflecting upon how we humans can undo the damage that we have caused our oceans through our negligence. Did you know that 14 million metric tons of garbage are dumped into our oceans every year? That is about 30.8 billion pounds. It is expected by 2050 that there'll be more plastic than fish. So what are we going to do about it? Huge garbage patches have been forming in the oceans. The western garbage patch is located near Japan, the eastern between Hawaii and California. The Atlantic and Indian Oceans both have trash vortices. Researchers believe that the Pacific patch is somewhere between the size of Texas and the size of Russia. The visibly identifiable plastics include plastic lighters, water bottles, pens, cell phones, plastic bags, hygiene products, and of course fishing gear, just to cite the tip of the iceberg. The ocean and the sun, it breaks down the products into tinier and tinier pieces. And sea turtles mistaken plastic bags for jellyfish. And then that's their favorite food. Albatross mistake plastic resin pellets for fish eggs. And they feed them to their chicks, who of course then starve. All the microplastics on the surface that blocks the sunlight from reaching the plankton and the algae, and that they form the base of every food chain in the ocean, so thereby collapsing them. After much scientific study, though, Ocean Cleanup, a Dutch organization, designed System 01 and quickly modified the technology to System 02. So let's watch the proposed System 03 at work. Three modeling suggests that a fleet of as few as 10 of these systems might be able to clean up the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. But the cost to run the vessels would be enormous, and the patch isn't a uniform island of plastic. Sophisticated ship navigation concentrates its efforts on dense accumulations. But the issue becomes the more they clean, the less rubbish being retrieved per unit of time, while burning through loads of fuel to do so. The cleanup would bankrupt any one country, which leads us to another problem. If the project stops, the patch will fill up again. Recall, the UN estimates 14 million tons of garbage enters the oceans each year. So what does prevention look like? As most plastic comes from about 1,000 rivers around the globe, many like the Mississippi, the Nile, the Niger, the Yangtze are major contributors because they travel through densely populated areas. After even more study then, Ocean Cleanup introduced a solar-powered machine, a boat, in 2016. The carbon-neutral interceptors can clean up to 50,000 kilograms of plastic each day, the equivalent of 9 elephants. Sensors distribute the trash across sorting bins, and a good amount will be recycled. The $77,000 per unit price is low compared to the cost of the environmental damage. As of this year, 10 interceptors are collecting rubbish in rivers in Jamaica, the USA, Central America, and parts of Asia. But these technological wonders are not alone. Other similar cleanup devices, many of which have been effectively working for much longer, are active in the rivers and waterways around the world. So together, they're attempting to turn off the tap of plastic flow into the oceans. Let's go with video 2.
To effectively solve these 1,000 rivers, we need a toolkit of solutions to really not just catch some plastic somewhere, but really always have the best solution for every river.
It's the same problem, but requires different solutions.
Of course, on one hand, it's really important that we have solutions that are scalable, that we can just build many of in series. Of course, that's what's really ingrained in the philosophy of these interceptors. But at the same time,
I think we have to accept that rivers are super diverse.
As one of my colleagues always likes to say, if you've seen one river, you've seen one river. You have different currents, you have different vessel traffic, sometimes you have water hyacinths like here, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you have big tidal differences. You have periods where there's just no water and then you have a flash floods, while in other places like here you just have water year round.
So also the way that you approach the problem should be different.
As with every project, things always turn out to be more complicated, more difficult than you imagined them to be at the beginning, right? Initially, our ambition really was to just have one kind of interceptor. The reality, though, is that rivers are very different to each other. And that's why we are now expanding the portfolio of interceptor solutions, where we can always choose the right solution for each of these different set of circumstances. So behind me, for example, you see the original interceptor, but we also have the interceptor barriers combined with an interceptor tender, which is a mobile solution, so you can service different rivers. For example, now in Jamaica, these small gullies, they're actually too small and too shallow to deploy a standard interceptor.
People are working, racking their brains to truly find solutions that will have an impact.
Ultimately, the only thing that counts for us is to effectively close this tap. We haven't seen all these 1,000 rivers yet. There may be certain variables that are new. So if we come across them, new solutions are going to be found, are going to be developed.
Human creativity is a glorious thing. Science and technology are always there to support brilliant ideas. The trouble is, if we depend on cleanup, we'll be cleaning up for the rest of our existence. We've got to tackle the problem at its source. The entire world needs to be aware of the work of ocean cleanup and other groups. And with consideration of local custom and culture, every country needs to step up and clear their plastic-choked waterways that dump into the ocean. Images of this type of activities send messages and help change people's behavior. So listen to what commentator Simon Clark and Dr. Virginia Schutte, experts in marine ecology, have to say about the issue of cleaning up our oceans of plastic.
But I want to be clear that we don't have all the data on the problem. One of the big issues in this field is actually a lack of data about what the optimal solution in a given location will look like. It's why researchers like Tim are so important to help us better understand what we're up against. But what we do understand, based on the data available, is that solutions need to be tailored to a specific geography, to a specific river. That, generally speaking, the closer to the source of plastic action can be taken, the more effective that action will be. And that many strategies are already known and understood, and we know they will work.
There's already so much work that people have done saying this is exactly what we need if we have money and attention going to the right places in the life of waste on our planet. Stopping plastics as they go into the ocean is kind of like a last resort. The amount of plastics entering the seas is so large that scooping up a tiny amount of it will not make very much of a difference at all.
Those solutions that already exist include organizations similar to the ocean cleanup, but more based on evidence-based best practices, such as the river cleanup and Water Witch. Mostly, however, the solutions are systematic, preventing companies from producing single-use plastics, substituting plastics with alternatives, and improving the availability of recycling and waste collection more broadly. Crucially, what this means on the ground will vary depending on where you are. Higher income countries should focus on reducing plastic usage and improving the availability of recycling, while lower income countries should focus on improving waste collection and reducing leakage from waste sites into the natural environment. And those actions must be taken in collaboration with and in such a way that empowers local communities, rather than just having a bunch of rich white guys turning up and telling you what to do.
So as cool as the technology of Ocean's Cleanup System 03 and the interceptors, built in 1,000 different versions, and the Water Witches, we must accept that across much of the world, the main problems resulting in ocean plastic are simply our over-addiction to the flexible polymer and a lack of effective domestic disposal of the stuff. The current global estimate, only 50% of household trash gets to any sort of organized dump. And even at that, waste facilities in much of the world don't have good ways to keep the refuse in. The wind blows it, ultimately landing it in the waterways. And most of us know the outcome of that nursery rhyme. When the wind blows, the cradle will fall. So how are we going to solve it? How are you going to solve it? Stop, or at least greatly reduce, the use of single-use plastics. Recycle fastidiously and religiously. Get out there and participate in land and water cleanups and spread the word. Recall the words of today's gathering prayer. Deepen in us a respect for your waters of life, that we may more fully drink the gift of your life-giving Spirit. Amen.
Thank you, Michele. Lots to weigh on us and also lots to inspire us. With that in mind, I invite you to stand with me as those of you who might like to make a profession of Christian faith can join in our affirmation.